Welcome back to The Short Game, a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Reagan Kelly, and I'm joined by awesome co-hosts Laura Nash. How are you doing, Laura?
I am doing great.
And my bro host, Shane Kelly. How are you doing, Shane?
Many a sleepless night lately. From babies. Let me tell you, they make noise all hours.
And that's why you play 2-hour puzzle games.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, this was a good one. This was a good... If I can say one thing for short games, it's that you can fit them in to a schedule where you are constantly being interrupted by the physical needs of a tiny human who can do nothing for himself.
This week we're talking about a game that is roughly 1 to 2 baby naps long.
Yes.
Gorogoa. Gorogoa is a puzzle game. It's a game that I'm frankly very worried. I've been nervous about this episode in a way that I haven't quite experienced in a while, or maybe at all, because this is a game that just almost completely defies description. It's an extremely interesting game, but I'm wondering whether we'll truly be able to kind of explain it in only audio, because it's such an intensely visual experience. But I'm hoping that one of you guys will kind of swoop in and save me with the perfect description of Gorogoa.
I'll give it a try. So, first of all, the first thing you're going to notice is it's a beautifully illustrated game. You have this kind of 4-panel square setup, and as you start interacting with these lovely panels, you're shifting them to the side, revealing layers underneath them. You're superimposing one on top of another. Two things might blend in the edges to each other. So when you put them next to each other, they become the same location. It's a really transformative game. It's a puzzle box that is very 2D, but it's got a lot of depth to it.
Yeah, it's... I think the most important thing about the game to me is it's a game where you are exploring these tableaus and slowly realizing that they are linked together, and it's making the connection between the different images in a way that that is the kind of goal of the puzzle. If I can compare it to one thing, I kept thinking of Mad Fold-Ins. You remember Mad Fold-Ins?
Wow. Actually,
in Mad
yes.
Fold-Ins, you had a picture, and then there was a dotted line, and you'd fold the picture, and it would make a totally different picture, and it was usually, played for a joke. Here, you've got these panels between, 2 and 4 of these panels, and you're dragging them around, and the panels, each of them are independently interactive, and so you can zoom in to different places on the picture and sometimes tap on certain things to do something. And as you do that, you shift things around and eventually try and line things up. But it's all about creating these scenes that you don't have any instructions on how to create the scenes. You just have to experiment and see where the dotted line that you fold things on actually is.
Yeah, two things will look completely different, and then through the interactions, you'll reveal something that looks like a parallel, and you aren't even sure necessarily if it's going to work, but you put two things next to each other or on top of each other or shift it around, and suddenly the whole game breaks open. It's a puzzle game where, unlike a lot of games, you don't know what you have to accomplish and the difficulty is the execution. Here, it's all about the aha moment. You're moving around things and you kind of reveal what you might have to do next. There's no obvious hints until you've started playing a while and you realize the mechanics, are building on top of another.
Well, there are absolutely obvious hints. I got to disagree with you there. The most obvious is that anything that's tappable will fire off these little ripples. And in a game where 90% of what you're doing is trying to figure out what to tap on in what order, just having that, I think, is, it's a pretty heavily clued experience. I don't think anyone going through this game would find themselves significantly lost. It's a puzzle game, but it's not extremely puzzling. It's more it has the look and feel of a puzzle, but it's more of an exploration game, I think.
I can at least sort of chime in and say that as the person on this show least likely to finish puzzle games, I completed it without any trouble. So, like, how hard it is, not really a concern. But it is a remarkable journey. The one thing I'm kind of concerned about here is that we've just kind of described the game. The trouble with this game, I think, is that even if you're describing its mechanics in a fairly concrete way, it sounds like you're speaking in generalities, because it's this it's this very sort of wordless experience that's all about just, you know, moving things around on a screen and trying to discover connections between them, which sounds like a weird generality, or like it sounds like we're trying not to describe the specifics of what you're doing. But we are. It's just very hard. Let me give you a very concrete example of one of the first interactions that you have in this game. And by doing so, I'll try and also describe sort of the story. The game has a story, which is kind of unraveled wordlessly throughout it. So the game starts with a single panel of a young boy looking out the window at a city. And it's this beautiful illustration of a city. It's hard to tell if it's any particular place. It looks a little bit fantastical, but a little bit grounded out of a window. And then past that window walks a really enormous, I guess, dragon creature. And from what I've read, this creature is the titular Gorogoa. This fantastically colored dragon walks by his window. And the first thing the boy does is get out an encyclopedia volume and start leafing through it, trying to find out what this thing was. And, you know, he looks at a page of coral, and he looks at a page of bugs, and finally there's a page of this dragon. And his thoughts appear in a kind of a rectangular thought bubble above his head that, when you tap on it, becomes a new panel. And then you can zoom back out of that, and he's now got some new ideas visually about this. And the first thing that you need to do is try to start him on his presumably journey of trying to find the Gorogoa, or I don't know what his exact goal is, but it seems to be a sort of a spiritual journey of connecting with this unknown or otherworldly creature. Just a very brief example would be that there is a door out his window far off in the distance. And the first thing that you'll probably do is tap on that door and zoom in on it. And the boy walks in a separate panel over to his closet. And so now, if you've zoomed in on the door that's distant out the window in one panel, and you've zoomed in on the closet in the other panel, you can then shift the frame of the door from the window over top of the frame of the door from the closet. And suddenly the boy is no longer in his own apartment. He's out on this distant rooftop. And that's just one super small example of like what concretely exactly we're talking about here, is that you have multiple different scenes, and it's rarely clear how they connect. They usually don't connect spatially. But then you can move or rearrange them in ways that they do have these connections. These two doors were in exactly the same place and lined up. This ribbon in one scene resembles a river on a map in another scene, and they line up in a way that allows you to move something between the two panels. A rock is falling in one panel, and you can place something for it to hit in another panel by arranging those panels next to each other. And it's finding those little connections or details between the panels that kind of allows the boy to progress on his journey from place to place throughout his, sort of a journey of discovering this creature.
Yeah, and to clarify what when I said earlier that it was obvious, Shane, you're completely right, that it is definitely always fair, and that the hint system of where to tap is I'm very grateful for it after doing some, Machinarium and other games where I would have loved something.
And
like
now
that.
I'll mention you can actually turn that off in the settings. I can imagine some people being a little bothered by that, but really all you're doing is setting yourself up for extra taps.
Yeah, but what I really appreciate is that the game gets out of your way and lets you explore, knowing you're going to back in and out of panels. You're going to maybe, need to look around a bit to figure out what you want to do next. It's not a game that initially, you're not going to always get it right the first time. You're going to be kind of moving things around and experimenting, and it definitely wants you to do that. A couple times I got the puzzle solution very quickly, and I almost felt a little cheated because I wanted to look around the space more, see what was there. I think that one of the nicest things about this is that it's kind of naturally got chapter systems.
Yeah.
It's not a one puzzle, one solution. Each, you're getting these balls to put into a blue bowl. Again, it sounds very metaphorical, but you're literally getting these balls and putting them in a blue bowl. And each one of those might be a series of 2 or 3 little moments of insight put together so that you really get this satisfying chapter conclusion feel. And you can actually use the menu to jump back and forth to those if you're showing off the game or want to look back at a spot you liked particularly well. But a lot of 2-hour games skip that kind of chapter. They assume you're going to do one sitting, one moment of accomplishment by the end. I really, really loved breaking my experience into little bits and having a satisfying moment, because I did need to do it in a couple sittings, and wanted that moment of accomplishment so I could put it down, pick it back up, and not worry about having lost all of this knowledge about where all of the doors were.
It's very good at not letting you get lost, even when towards the middle of the game, it really kind of opens up and you have 4 panels on screen, each of which has the possibility of navigating between several different scenes and different zoom levels, I guess. Lots of different possible combinations, and yet it really does a great job of, like, I wouldn't say guiding you through things, because it really does expect you to like figure it out yourself, but it's never overwhelming. And that's something I really appreciated about this game, is that it's a really manageable game for people even who don't like puzzle games. Like I'm that guy. I'm really terrible with puzzle games, but this game just made me feel smart the entire time. I never felt stuck. It's really beautifully beautiful. It's a smooth experience.
I would actually say I don't think that. So, of course, we are a games podcast and we try and cover games, and we're very broad in what we categorize as a game. But there's an argument to be made that this is not purely a game or not primarily a game. To me, it is more of a piece of art, like a piece of interactive art. It has more in common with a children's book, I think, than it does with a puzzle, for example. Like it reminds me of the way that you kind of fall into these pictures in a way. Reminds me a lot of like Powers of 10, where you're kind of zooming in and seeing that things are very different on different scales, or It's inspired by a book that I had as a kid called, this is what I read in an interview, he said it's inspired by a book called Maze, that I remember having when we were kids, and it was like a book where there was like a puzzle within the book, but it was more just about finding the connections between these images, right? You find the answers, the clues, to go from section to section. So to me, it feels like it feels more inspired by like those really fancy pop-up picture books where there's something hidden everywhere. It's not something where there's like an objective. It's more like something where there's a progression that you're gonna fall through and flow through.
Well, I don't know. Yes, all of that, yes, and I think it's a really good puzzle game. Like I think this has better puzzles than most games that I've played. This is about discovering connections, and what are puzzles except discovering connections? I think the thing that really worked for me about this is that it's it's a sort of a spiritual story, right? It has a story. This boy sees this otherworldly thing and wants to know it, and then the game plays out with scenes across this boy's entire life, starting, which in a way that sort of looks like kind of a timeline of the 20th century. Like it starts with with peace, and then there is war, and then there is rebuilding, and you see the boy at different ages throughout this, sometimes multiple ages at the same time in different panels. And so it's this sort of story of a life spent in search of meaning or connection with this creature or idea
dragon.
That the creature, dragon, or whatever this dragon represents. And the puzzles are all about the sort of feeling of like looking out your window and trying to find connections between things in your world. I think that's what really is like great about this game, is that like the puzzles feel like this sort of natural discovery, but they are all these cute or clever or just amazing little aha moments of like finding something that just perfectly slots into place with something else.
The images that keep repeating are men of different age looking over books and thinking and learning new things, or people reaching kind of a point where they can't go further and thinking about what they might do next. Like those are the only... There's nobody talking in this game. There's not even like a little, talk bubbles or two people have a fake dialogue tree where people go, "Mah, mah, mah." There's none of that.
Yeah, there's not a single word apart from the title screen.
It's just people reading, thinking, contemplating, or doing kind of ritualistic spiritual practices. Like that's what people do in this game. And it's really interesting to me that it feels so quiet and so, the sound design is great, actually.
Oh, yeah.
But it feels very focused, very contemplative. And I like a game where you're asked to kind of study and sit and poke around.
Yeah.
It's not... we play a lot of games that are, going to pump you up and really rile you up and shoot a lot of things. And this game is a lot more... I wouldn't say you should play it before bed. I wouldn't say it's necessarily going to put you to sleep or anything, but it is very solitary.
I thought it was sort of meditative is the word that I would use. Like it did not put me to sleep by any measure. It was very fascinating, but it felt it was very meditative for me. And this was probably the most like zen 2 hours I've spent with my iPhone.
I played a big chunk of it with my wife, kind of the two of us passing the phone back and forth and trying to figure things out. And that was really enjoyable, being able to kind of talk your way through it and make those connections. It's so wordless that there's like if you're trying to play with somebody, you can't explain to them what you want them to do in a lot of cases. That was kind of funny. Like it's like, oh, just give it to me here. Yeah. And I'll move this here, move this there, and tap this. Okay, boom, we got it.
Lord help you if you're trying to do like whoever's trying to write a non-video walkthrough of this game, like, more power to you. I'm sure someone's trying to do it. The game fact on this is going to be
impossible.
Gifts only.
Yeah, but the thing I was thinking about the most as I was playing it, like the game that it's most similar to, and the reason I thought my wife Julia would really like it, and it turned out she did, is it's in a lot of ways similar to hidden object games. There's a few really good games in this genre and a huge number of really, really bad games in this genre. Like if you think about like back to comparing it to books, but Where's Waldo? And this year I've been playing a lot of Hidden Folks, which is a really tremendous hidden object game, and it's these kinds of games are all about looking at a big, complex, beautiful picture and finding the next thing, right? The things that you're trying to find. This game is exactly that. The difference is that you can't see the whole picture all at once. You have to kind of assemble the picture yourself and then find what you're looking for. So, that extra and kind of novel kind of interaction, I think, makes it work in a much more entertaining way, just much more fun.
Yeah, I know that fans of graphic novels, the designer and developer of this game did mention that he was inspired by Chris Ware's graphic novel work.
Oh, yeah.
He does he wrote building stories and a lot of other books where it's about people, but within larger places, and a lot of, the interior structures of buildings, and kind of how this kind of collage feel to graphic novels is something he wanted to put into this game.
Yeah, we should talk a little bit about the developer of this game, because I think the development story of this is pretty interesting on its own. This was the work of a single guy. His name is... Shit, let me give it again.
Jason Roberts.
Thank you. His name is Jason Roberts, and he's, in a lot of places I've seen, he's described as a former professional programmer or developer. So I guess he sort of left a career in non-games tech work in order to work on this project. And it's entirely his work apart from the sound. So he did all of the illustration and animation. He did all of the game design and all of the programming, and created this thing it's extremely unique, and it's extremely sort of like the vision and design of a single guy. And what I think is really interesting about it is that this is a game that took a really long time for him to create. This is a 2-hour game that took over 5 years to come out. He released a demo of the game all the way back in 2012, and this was just like a publicly released demo. And he then kept working on the project and refining it and revising it and adding on to and taking away from it for 5 years.
I actually saw 7 from someone else.
That's incredible.
Yeah, no, you're right. 7 years. Wait, how long has it been since? And what I think is so fascinating about that is that he kept the scope so small, even after all of that time. This was, apparently there are tons of puzzles and scenes that were left on the cutting room floor during this project. Pretty much everything from the original demo from 2012 is gone from the full game. And there have been multiple versions. He apparently showed it at some shows in 2014 where it won a bunch of awards, but still took several years after that to come out. Even most of the content of that version of the game, it ended up on the cutting room floor because he did not leave a single thing in this game that did not feel like it added to the whole.
The amount of playtesting that must have gone into this is really astounding, because I think my limited experience with writing puzzles for people to solve, when I was working on Microsoft Puzzle Day, I found out the difference between a really good puzzle writer and someone else is the person who's willing to cut and cut and cut and cut and cut and have 13 ideas and end up with one good puzzle. The people who were too attached really ended up with messes. And I think it's a lot more ingenious because he was willing to abandon probably gorgeous hand-drawn art that was unclear. This is there's a lot more depth, both literal and metaphorical, to each picture, because I think he really, really thought through the design of this.
Yeah, and the length of the game is really important here. I mean, I know we constantly celebrate short games, but he did an interview with Rock Paper Shotgun where he was talking specifically about the length of the game, and about how this game was in development for so long and was refined over such a long period. And one of the things he said there was, "I'm really happy the game isn't longer. I've had a game that was about 2 hours long for maybe the last 2 years and have spent the time since refining that 2-hour game rather than extending the length. Everyone will have to trust me that this was the right choice, although I know not everyone will. My point is, the length isn't merely the result of limited resources. It was very important to me that every scene in the game have a legitimate reason to exist within the narrative, at least within my own mind, while simultaneously functioning as a piece of the puzzle." So I really love that perspective that this enormous game, by terms of how much of this guy's life went into creating this thing, is this finely polished, tiny experience. And this is without a doubt, one of the most polished things I've ever played on the iPhone. And it's out on other platforms too. We didn't really talk about the platforms this is on. This is on Steam, on both Mac and PC, I think. And it's on iOS, plays great on iOS, and also on the Nintendo Switch, which is nice because this is such a touchscreen-oriented game. If you're looking for a neat game to play on the Switch and you want something touchscreen-oriented, this is a really great option. I played it on the iPhone, but like the only game that I can think of playing on the iPhone that even remotely measures up to this in level of polish is Monument Valley. And I actually saw a lot in common between this and Monument Valley, which we've talked about on the show before. Monument Valley is a phenomenal game. But like this, I think I like this even better. Like this, there was a bit in the middle of Monument Valley where I felt like it started to drag a little bit. Like, I thought it was a good length, but this is just so perfect. It's just such a perfectly polished little experience.
Yeah, it does feel like it was kind of made just for us.
Yeah, I like the obscure story on this game a lot better than the obscure story in Monument Valley.
If I have one critique I'll level at this game, the art is very good, but I didn't find it very expressive. Like it has this the draftsmanship of the artwork is incredible. It's full of these scenes of buildings and objects that are incredibly ornate, and even the title dragon Gorogoa is just beautifully, incredibly ornate, and in particular that character is very colorful. But most of the game is composed of these very drab scenes that are drawn in a very kind of functional way and don't, to me, have like a strong style or voice, if that makes sense to you. That's very, it looks like an architect's drawing, more so than an illustration.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. The art style reminded me most of like sort of naturalist illustrations, or the kinds of things that you might find in an illustrated encyclopedia. I think it's beautiful, but it definitely has this sort of style that seems like it's trying very hard to depict a realistic scene. It resembles like a pencil sketch, but like a really, really accurate pencil sketch, colored pencils and all. But it's an interesting point. It's not like a stylish look to the game. It's very draftsman-y. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very clear what you're looking at. For a game that to me is an experience that's primarily an artistic one, the art feels very does the job.
Well, the color is really interesting because it's often neutral gray or kind of a warm sand color, or a very dim lighting, and you tend to see a lot of neon and brightness in a lot of games coming out. I think that it's almost a somber palette, which makes it, when it pops into a really bright scene, outside in a summery day, or when you have something that is a very vibrant color, it has this weird extra energy to it. So to me, the contrast worked, but I can definitely see that a lot of stuff is kind of that kind of drab, muted palette is a lot of the game. Definitely intentionally so, but I can see how that would kind of it sets a mood.
Yeah,
I'll put it that way. It sets a mood.
And something that I think kind of defines the art style for me is just sort of this level of almost extreme detail in the illustrations. The thing that's really so interesting about it is that you're constantly zooming in and out on these scenes, and it maintains this level of detail throughout. So, like, if you might see like a cart that's being wheeled along, and the wheel has a little design or pattern on it, and it's very detailed, and you can tell that. But if you tap and zoom in on that wheel, It does an extremely smooth animation where you're zooming in on that wheel and it reveals new detail as it comes out. And it feels like everything is like these ultra detailed illustrations. And it gives you this feeling that like I could zoom in on any part of this. Obviously, you can't zoom in on literally any part of this, but it feels like there's this almost fractal like aspect to this art where it's like no matter how close or far you get, there's this sort of fixed level of detail that I thought that art style just, it really appealed to me. I can see the points that you're making, Shane, but like I just love the way this game looks.
One of the most obscure parts of this game is probably the story. It's, of course, presented wordlessly. So as we kind of get into talking about it, I would probably put all of the story, as we're about to discuss it, behind a spoiler break, whether or not it's something that really can be spoiled, because the story itself is, I'll say it's a little bit obscure, and you know, for such a short game, it'd be easy to ruin, especially if we start discussing the specifics of particular puzzles. So. Are you guys ready to chat about the story of this game?
I'm not sure I have much to add about the story of the game that we haven't already discussed, but I'm happy to give it a shot post spoiler break. Before we do that, just for those of you who aren't going to be continuing with us past the spoiler break, I'm imagining you'll know better than I will looking at the time clock on your podcast player how much we talk about the actual story of the game past the spoiler break. But if you're leaving us at this point, thank you for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. I've been Reagan Kelly, and you can find me on Twitter at ReaganK, that's RayGanK, or you can find our show on the web at www.theshortgame.net, where you'll find a contact form. We want to hear from you about games that you're excited for in 2018, things that we should be keeping our eye on. The holidays is always a kind of a slow time for game releases, but we're finally past that now, and hopefully we're going to be seeing some really interesting stuff in the new year here. So if you play a short game or see one on the horizon that you're interested in, let us know. You can also find our show on Twitter at _shortgame. And of course, you can find us on all of the podcast platforms, iTunes, etc. Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Laura J. Nash.
And Shane, where can people find you?
Also Twitter at 8BitShane.
And then here it is, your spoiler break.
In a world of indie games with obscure stories, this one has even less in the toolbox. I mean, we just get a little bits of fleeting images. That said, I mean, I think we all can agree that it's one person and not just like random scholarly old men. To me, the first time that I kind of was super surprised was when the kid falls from the dragon, and that's why he's in a wheelchair. Did that surprise anybody else?
Oh, you know, I guess I didn't put that together, like, but you're right.
This kid is falling from a dragon. So at the end of the game, for people who didn't listen to us and are playing, again, it's a very obscure plot. It's not like, this is not a puzzle solution, but you give your tokens to the dragon, and then the kid falls, and then right before he hits the ground, it's a memory of a guy, an older version of the kid in a wheelchair. And I was like, oh,
ouch.
The kid fell from the sky and broke his something.
I think the key image of the game for me that kind of illustrates what the story is about is that when he initially sees that image of the dragon in his encyclopedia or whatever he's reading through, he sees that picture of the bowl with the like 6 or was it 5 balls, you know, or whatever.
Fruits.
And then it's being held up
balls.
by a young man and an old man. And obviously, like, that's him throughout his life. So this is the story of him trying to find this connection with this otherworldly thing, and it's a journey that takes him his entire life. Now, the actual specifics, like, I don't know how much story or you know, action we can really describe here other than that he's progressing through the ages of his life from his youth to middle age to old age. And throughout that time, he's looking for these spheres of, I don't know, knowledge, whatever.
Spirit orbs.
Yeah,
They're
spirit orbs. Sure.
Yeah.
They look just like the ones in Zelda.
Yeah, I guess they do.
It's more symbolic than anything else. I can't imagine that it feels a bit to me like leafing through the photographs of a person's life and trying to reconstruct a story when you don't really know how much time has taken place between any of these things. It's just flashes of images of this man at different times of his life throughout probably, decades.
Yeah, I think it's the most interesting thing is kind of what's going on around the man. He's done a really good job of making the different kind of ages of his life have sort of different surroundings in different ways. Like when he's older, you see him working in his work. Well, you see him frequently just sort of sitting at a desk or working in his workshop. Like there's a time where he's intently studying, but he's surrounded by like war outside. It's like, the bombs are shaking the building, and all of that is of a piece with the entire scene. Like your scene is being shaken by these explosions, and that's part of how you solve that puzzle. And he's also got some like emotional life to it. Like there's a scene where he's younger, and I think it must be after he is crippled, but before the war, and he's looking out of a window and contemplating jumping out. Like he's thinking about killing himself. And that was one of the most interesting scenes to me, just because like you start to get a sense of this guy as a person, and then you also, in solving the puzzle, like he sort of makes the decision, like almost defeated, not to leap out the window. There were moments that I couldn't really figure out, and a lot of them were the boy version of the main character, who's actually going through the process of collecting things. He's mainly like character distinguished by having this little red shirt on and looks different from the other instances of the man, I guess. And as that character, you're going through some pretty oddball scenes. Like you're walking from painting to painting, or from photograph to photograph on a wall, and you're climbing up a ladder that's actually a
train track map, or
train track, tracks from a train map, and it gets much more bizarre. And having that most active version of the character be the young one before any of this sort of more real stuff has happened to him, I think is interesting, and maybe it says something about the character. But I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about that. I can't quite parse it out.
To me, it felt like they started off with the boy was collecting things, but for some reason, the first sacrifice, the first offering failed. And the first offering failed, and the rest of his life, he's been gaining knowledge to find out how to fix it. So his former self, it's kind of, I failed at this point, so the rest of my life I'm going to study up and find out what I should have done, and then kind of go back in time and help my younger self solve the puzzles properly. That's what the last chapter felt like.
I'm going to kill me that Gorogoa for taking my legs.
Yeah, or I'm going to properly sacrifice that to the Gorogoa, because it seemed like the last chapter was kind of going back fruit by fruit, spirit orb by spirit orb, and re-solving the problems so that the boy could make a successful sacrifice.
I love when games do that, by the way, that sort of like last act that kind of retells with a twist and much faster the earlier acts of the game. I kind of love that, and this game did a wonderful job with that. I always sort of thought of the like young boy character as representing the will and spirit of the man, rather than sort of directly being him in most of those scenes, because you are seeing him age and everything, and then this young version of him is continuing on to do all of, accomplish all of his goals. It did sort of feel like it's a journey of the spirit, right? This is a game, it's a very spiritual game. And a quote I really liked from the developer did an interview with Kotaku, and one of the things he was talking about the story was, he said, I think of the character as a mystic. He's devoted to something outside the world and trying to find it. And I really love that. Like, this is the story of someone who is devoted to this idea of this creature, the Gorogoa, and he is trying to find it his entire life. And so the game plays out as, mostly metaphor, I think. Metaphor for his spiritual journey to try and find this creature, or to connect with this otherworldly thing or experience. It feels a little silly to like have a spoiler break on something that's so intensely metaphorical, but it's I think every element of this game is this like large scale metaphor for a spiritual journey, and the specifics of that spiritual journey we can't really put our finger on. It's whatever it means to you, I think.
Well, this has been a really fun game to play, and a really wonderful game to start 2017 with.
2018. I'm going to be writing 2017 on my checks for the next year, but it is 2018.
You know how I know you're old? It's because you write checks.
I wish I didn't have to.
Check burn.
Yes, 2018 is off to a good start with this game. One of my biggest hopes for 2018 is that we find more games this short. So, listeners, I want to thank you for all the wonderful suggestions. This was a very heavily recommended game.
Yeah, thank you so much to all the listeners who suggested that we play this. I should have probably collected a list of names before so I could specifically call folks out, but you know who you
Y'all
are.
know who you are.
Yeah, thank you for recommending this game, listeners and Twitter friends.
Yes, absolutely. And if you have other games that are this short, this is perfect. I was able to finish this game and still raise my child. So I want to thank each of you for recommending it, and I want to thank this game for existing.
And we should mention where people can find this. I mentioned earlier that it's on Steam, on iOS, and on the Switch. I played it on iOS because, frankly, this is a great game on iOS, and it is $5 on iOS, which is an absurd steal for a game this polished. But on other platforms, it's a bit more.
Shout out to the iOS build, because it has excellent sync ability to go between your phone and your iPad. So if you have both devices, if you have a smaller phone but want to keep playing, that works perfectly.
Yes, it does. Looks beautiful on an iPad.
And I thought it looked really, really great on the iPhone. I have a iPhone 7 Plus, and the game has a really nice feature on the plus size phones, and I assume probably on the smaller phones as well. I don't think this is in the desktop, the Windows, and actually I just found out it's not on Mac, so the Windows version of the game I don't think has the sort of zoom feature, but on the phone, to compensate for the smaller screen, you can at any time kind of increase the size or zoom in on any one of the 4 panels, and it does that incredibly fluidly. It just felt completely natural. So the iOS version, I don't think you are losing anything by playing this on an iOS device, and you're saving $10. So I think play this on whatever platform you want to play it on, but don't feel like you'd be losing anything by playing the less expensive iOS version. It is a phenomenal iOS game. But if you do decide to buy it on Steam, you can get a bundle with Edith Finch. So if you missed Edith Finch earlier or late last year, you can get both games and get a little discount, which is nice.
Yeah, I just want to say Annapurna Interactive has come onto the scene over the course of this last year and are doing nothing but releasing stuff that is really super good and artistically beautiful. So nice work, guys.
Yeah, tons of stuff on here. What Remains of Edith Finch and this game, both phenomenal games. Coming hopefully later this year, published by them, Donut County, which that's something we've been looking for forever. Kentucky Route Zero TV edition apparently was published by them, something that we have been meaning to play for this show for a very long time and just seem to have not been getting around to it.
Well, we were kind of waiting on a couple more of the episodes to come out.
Yeah, they did the iOS port of Flower, which is a game that I've been meaning to play for a long time.
It seems their way of doing things is, or at least if this game is any indication, is that they're out there looking for games that are beautiful, are toured, interesting, interactive experiences that might have a wide appeal, and they're putting some money and a real advertising budget behind them. They sort of swooped in with Gorogoa when he was just about to run out of money and gave him some funding that he needed to finish the game, and also helped promote it. And that's, I think, a really great sort of model for a publisher. Is this I've been seeing a lot of publishers have this sort of more record label kind of vibe to them over the last few years. These indie publishers who are not out there looking for games that are all the same, either mechanically or whatever. They're just all games that are kind of connected by a certain kind of aesthetic. I think these guys and Devolver Digital would be good examples of this, where they have this sort of record label vibe. They are collecting together things that fit a certain, not exactly aesthetic, but like just ethos, and helping bring them out and making sure that they're promoted to people who are going to care. And so I think this is great. Like, I'm really glad to see Annapurna, doing this. And just based on their slate of games, I think they are a publisher to keep an eye on.
This year, they have something that I know is going to be up your alley, Reagan. It's coming out this year called Florence, and it's a interactive novel about love.
We talked about that. Isn't that who is it that's making that?
I was very excited about that. One of the designers of Monument Valley.
Yes, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, it looks very cute.
When I saw that it was a interactive novel and it was a love story, I was like, Reagan's a big softie.
It's me. You know me.
I think I just looked at the art and was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna like this.
Yeah, the art looks super cute. And they're also publishing Watam, which is from the Katamari Damacy creator, who has he done anything since Nabi Nabi Boy? This might be his first thing since that.
Yeah, I missed the boat on Nabi Nabi Boy.
I do not know that.
I don't think you really missed
that game
much.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's going to be an interesting year. 2018, year of the short games, calling it now.
Yep.
I said that about 2017.
Yep, and 16. I think every year since 2014 has been the year of the short games. So thank you guys for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. We already did all of our admin before the spoiler break, so I'll just leave it with thank you guys for listening.
iTunes reviews.